What if the love story you adore was never supposed to be a love story at all? Today, we're exploring how Pretty Woman transformed from a bleak, gritty character study into one of cinema's most iconic romantic comedies, and what we gained and lost in the process. It's almost impossible to imagine Pretty Woman as anything other than what we know, the 1990 Garry Marshall rom-com that made Julia Roberts a superstar and gave us all permission to believe in fairy tale endings. But here's what most people don't realize. The original script, titled simply 3,000, the amount Edward agrees to pay Vivian for the week, was a completely different beast. This version tapped into the darker realities of sex work, depicting Vivian as someone hardened by what she'd had to do for survival, living in a world where humiliation is for the shy and fear is for the innocent. In this darker iteration, Vivian wasn't a charming, quick-witted woman just waiting for the right man to see her potential. The original script portrayed her as a drug addict, with a deal struck between her and Edward. He'd pay her an extra $1,000 not to use drugs during their week together. And in the original ending, he throws her out of a car, throws the money on top of her, and drives away, leaving her in a dirty alley. In this version, Edward wasn't the reformed romantic lead we root for in the final film. Instead, he came across as manipulative and emotionally detached, treating their relationship as nothing more than a transaction, viewing all connections through the lens of what he could gain with little regard for the person involved. The story was essentially a study in exploitation and human degradation. No redemption, no growth, no happy ending, just two broken people in a transactional arrangement that would ultimately leave them both empty. What saved us from a completely different movie? A production company collapse. Just 3 days after Julia Roberts accepted the role, the small company producing the film folded, leaving her without a job. This moment of chaos should have marked the end of Roberts' involvement with the script entirely. Instead, it became the turning point for the entire film's direction. When Disney's Touchstone Pictures picked up the project, Roberts found herself confused about how a major studio would handle such dark material. She recalled thinking, went to Disney? Are they going to animate it? But then something remarkable happened. Director Garry Marshall, who came on board to helm the film, felt it would be fair to meet with Roberts since she'd briefly held the role. And rather than sticking with the gritty original, Marshall decided the entire story needed to be reimagined. The transformation from script to screen was dramatic. Marshall was initially hesitant about changing the ending because the script was well respected in Hollywood, and he didn't want to be accused of turning it into fluff, but he pushed forward anyway, guiding the script through 6 rewrites by several writers until it became the Cinderella story we know. The changes went far deeper than just altering the ending. Elements like Edward's girlfriend and the cheating storyline were removed, along with his alcoholism and Vivian's drug addiction. What emerged was a fundamentally different story about transformation, agency, and the possibility of genuine connection across class lines. This wasn't merely softening the edges of a dark film. It was a complete recalibration of tone and meaning. Rather than focusing on the harsh realities of sex work and classism, the new version emphasized optimistic themes like love, personal growth, and overcoming social barriers. Vivian went from a woman trapped in a cycle of addiction and survival to someone capable of choosing her own future. Edward transformed from a sociopath treating women as disposable into someone capable of genuine feeling and vulnerability. There's a legitimate argument to be made that the softer approach came at a cost. The darker version could have offered something more tangible for audiences interested in a realistic cause-and-effect relationship, where structural inequality doesn't magically dissolve because a wealthy man falls in love. The original 3000 maintained an unflinching gaze at the commodification of women's bodies and the way wealth creates casual cruelty. It never let viewers hide behind romance or pretend that love alone solves systemic problems. The final Pretty Woman, while still addressing themes of class and commodification, wraps them in a more palatable narrative. Some viewers have rightfully critiqued the film for leaning too heavily into the fantasy that money and a good man can solve everything, when the reality of sex work is far more complicated and often traumatic. Yet there's no denying the power of what Marshall's version accomplished. Pretty Woman challenged what were considered traditional male and female roles at the time, reversing power dynamics between the pair as the film progresses and exploring the commodification of relationships and the power of money. But beyond these themes, the film did something quietly significant. It allowed its female lead to be the agent of her own transformation rather than a victim waiting to be saved. Yes, Edward comes up the fire escape with a rose between his teeth, a classic rescue. But Vivian had already made her own decision to leave the streets and pursue an education before he arrived. She rescues him right back. The film gave audiences a leading woman who was multifaceted, witty, assertive, and fully capable of shaping her own destiny. It also gave us a male lead who could be flawed and human without being irredeemably broken. The lighter take worked. Pretty Woman became one of the highest-grossing rom-coms of all time, transformed Julia Roberts into a household name, and created a template for an entire generation of romantic comedies where female characters could have agency and depth. Roberts herself has said of the original darker version, "I couldn't do it then, I couldn't do it now. Thank God it fell apart." So yes, we lost the unflinching social commentary that 3000 could have offered, but what we gained was a film that demonstrated you could address serious issues, exploitation, class, power imbalance, while still allowing your characters hope. That contradiction, that tension between harsh reality and human resilience, might actually be the most honest thing the film has to offer. This is Ladies First, watching women in movies. Here, we celebrate how female characters navigate their world, make choices, and define themselves on their own terms. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments.